Welcome to Inside Aesthetics, the world's leading podcast for injectors and aesthetic businesses. I'm Dr. Jake Sloan, an aesthetic doctor with over 16 years experience in facial aesthetics.
And I'm David Siegel, an entrepreneur and business mentor with over 20 years of experience in our industry. Our podcasts are aimed at industry professionals, and any information or advice given is general in nature. You should consult with a healthcare provider before undergoing any treatment.
You can also subscribe to us on Patreon for on-demand content for injectable and business education.
Welcome to Podcast Friday.
Hooray! We are welcoming back a very, very old alumni from the podcast.
Yeah.
Now, Woodrow, I'm going to test your memory. What
Old.
episode you were on?
Was I in the first 25, first 50 maybe?
Not quite that old. You were episode 90. So
Okay, great.
still in the first 100.
Yeah.
I listened back to a little bit, and we were just emerging from lockdown, I think, or one of the lockdowns. And the audio was terrible. There was a lot of buffering. Yeah, it was
rubbish.
felt like a long time ago.
It was rubbish. And, well, I guess just to sort of quickly orientate the listeners, your name is Woodrow Wilson. You're a professional photographer from down in Melbourne. You've got a business called Clinical Imaging, and your area of expertise, the clues in the name, is photography and the way that we capture, I guess, photography in our aesthetic practices. So medical photography, before and after results. So it's been a long time since we covered this discussion, particularly here in Australia. There's been lots of regulatory changes around the use of before and after photos and advertising in general. And as Jake said, it's been almost 200 episodes since we've had you on. Obviously, technology.
4 or 5 years, I believe.
Yeah. Technology is moving really quick, and photography is such a big part of what we do every day in our clinics, whether we're clinicians or business owners. It's a way that we document what we do, from patients wanting to see how their results have fared to prove to other patients how good we are at what we do. And we just thought it's time to have Woodrow back on and talk about what's happening in the industry and gives people some hints and tips and some general knowledge about how clinical photography works.
Yeah, and I'm mindful that Woodrow's sort of a household name in many clinics here in Australia. And, I speak to you regularly, Woodrow, but there'll be many listeners who've never come across you. Maybe they missed episode 90, and maybe they missed our COVID webinar that we did as well. So do you want to just sort of give people your take on what you do and your business, just to get people on the right page?
Sure. Firstly, thank you for having me back all these years later. It's been really wonderful watching you guys grow over the last 4.5 years and see the length and breadth of the people you've spoken to across the world. I really feel like you guys are the archive of the best information across aesthetics. I don't know that you've got any contemporaries the side of the planet, at least. And you guys should be very proud of the impact you have, because, ultimately all these communication platforms, they're, you have to help people grow, do better by themselves, their patients, their business. So yeah, you guys should be really proud.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're tired as well, but we're carrying on.
That's a given. We're all tired.
Yeah. And likewise to you too. You've had a lot of growth as well over the last 4 or 5 years or even longer. So everyone I talk to, especially my consulting clients here in Australia in particular and in the United States, they all know of you. They know your system. So, well done to you too. It's a mutual admiration society here this afternoon.
I was teaching this morning in a clinic out in West Pennant Hills, about half an hour from me, and they're installing your system soon. They're doing a reno of their clinic and they're installing your system.
Yeah.
Oh, great.
If you had spoken, I could have got you a discount or a deal, but
yeah, and more of that later. We'll remind our listeners at the end of the podcast that we do have a special offer for people that want to potentially look at your systems. Before we jump into the topics, maybe let's just reorientate the listeners that haven't heard you speak in a while, and those that potentially new to the podcast. Just tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and how you ended up in this industry.
Thank you. The executive summary is I started this company called Clinical Imaging Australia in 2013. Believe it or not, that company name was not registered, so I got on it as soon as I found out. And it's because I've been a photographer since 2008, and I stumbled across a plastics surgery scientific congress, the Darwin ASAPS meeting in 2012. And I was the conference photographer, the guy who walks around doing happy snaps of the booths and the plenary and just capturing the mood of the event. And I've always been interested in medicine, and I started watching these presentations. The thing that jumped out at me immediately was, despite the credentials of the person who was speaking, the photographs didn't match what they were talking about. And not just from a image quality point of view, but from a objectivity, a scientific point of view. Like the images were either distorted, the lighting was different, color was way off. And I saw an opportunity there. And serendipitously, some of the surgeons came up to me, specifically Dr. Craig Late in Southport in Queensland, and Dr. Mark Magnuson in Brisbane. And he said, come into our practice, have a look at what we do, see if you can make it better. And then fast forward 10, 11 years now, we're in 160 plus clinics in 10 countries. And I have to sort of gauge my humbleness most days, because I've built this thing that a lot of people use, hundreds of patients a day around the world. It's my baby, as you do when you start something. And I care a lot about it and what it does for people. So I'm very, very lucky that the problem exists, and I'm very fortunate I can do something about it.
Right. What kind of photography were you doing before you I know you ended up here serendipitously, but did you get into photography to do weddings? Were you interested in sort of landscapes, or like what was the original plan?
The good question, because I grew up in South Africa and I moved to Australia in 2004. Don't have any qualifications. I finished high school and I was always interested in film. And photography was a very quick way to get into storytelling and filming people, interesting characters, actors, performers. So sort of 2005, that was my vehicle out of, making coffee in the cafe, where I could assist well-known photographers. You dive into landscapes, weddings, portraiture, and then you figure out what works for you and what you're good at. And then I sort of ended up doing a mixture of events and portraiture. Right. So, and then I met a very well-known lady, Gina Samuels, from the production house events, and we did a few weddings together, a few bar mitzvahs. And then she said, she gave me no notice one day, and she's like, can you get up to Darwin by the weekend? We've got this event for you to photograph. And the rest is history.
There you go. That's a great story, Woodrow. So clinical photography, I think it should be fairly obvious what that means, but just to sort of, I guess, establish, the ground rules of 101 of clinical photography, what are we talking about, and what does it mean? Why is it important?
At the top level, clinical photograph is any image of a patient for assessment, diagnostic, or medical record. It's important for 101 reasons. I would say the main ones are, you've got a legal obligation to take a photograph of someone before you do any sort of intervention. It has to be part of the medical record, which means there's things like the Privacy Act in Australia, which means you have to hold that file for 5 to 7 years, depending on the state. And for practice, whether it's reconstructive or aesthetic, it is really that first opportunity for you to have a conversation with the patient about what they see, what you see, what the treatment options are, and to make it a realistic conversation, not one that is muddied by distortion or bad technology or iPhones or iPads, where you're not really seeing what is there in the anatomy. And then, there's other things down the track like marketing and before and afters and Google SEOs and such. But fundamentally, it's about a relationship with the patient.
Yeah, right. Okay, so let's talk about the patient-clinician relationship and documenting results. Mm-hmm. What are the sort of main concepts that people need to get their head around when they're talking about clinical photography, or when they're planning to look for a system within their clinic, or how they're going to approach taking photographs of their patients? Where do they start?
I think starting point is getting a system and realizing that your phone, your iPad, or the doctor or dentist third old camera is not good enough. Mm-hmm. Purely because when it comes to photographs, they are medical data at the end of the day. So you have to be in control of that information, where it's stored and stored safely, who has access to it. And you have to try reproduce your photographs in different times, intervals over, weeks, months, and years. So you need a system. The great thing about all the systems, mine and others, is that you don't need to know the science behind them, because the systems are there to automate things and to make things easy for you. So effectively, it's point and click. So the biggest hurdle we find is getting people to understand that, their devices, like their personal phone or their iPad, it's not good enough from a technological point of view, from a data safety point of view, and it doesn't look professional when you are taking a photograph with your phone and the time of day has changed the image, or the color balance of the light that your patient's under has changed the skin tone. You really, as a clinician, want to give that patient the most amount of information they've ever seen about themselves. And you can't do that with iPads and phones. So when you are shopping around and looking for systems, you need to try to find a product that suits how busy your clinic is and your patient flow, because most clinics go through the similar patient flow of when a patient arrives and gets assessed or reviewed. The second thing I would probably say is you be wary of a lot of systems from overseas, because often the support is very lacking. And if you don't have that ability to call someone for help or troubleshooting or training, that can really cause a embarrassing situation when you're with your patient. If it's a plastic surgeon, patient might be naked in front of you and your device doesn't start up, and then you've got a call center to the US. Or if you're just trying to meet that patient for the first time and they're nervous and you don't know the technology you're using because you haven't been trained properly. Those are big considerations that I usually tell people when they start up this process of looking for a system.
When you either meet people at conferences or indeed when I teach injectors, I always sort of struggle to impress on them why it's so important, or they sort of hear, yes, good photos would be amazing. However, I'm just going to go back to what I do, which is the phone sort of usually. And I just find this barrier. People just don't want to sort of address what is clearly a big problem, because ultimately they don't have a record of their patient or what they did, or a good record anyway.
Well, they don't have an accurate record.
Yes.
So they may have a record, but not an accurate one. And look, there's different approaches. You can get people who are worried about the legal implications of where that file's stored. That's maybe 10% of people. You get other people who are worried about the marketing, and that's sort of where the TGA opera stuff comes in, where they want to market their work well and to stand out online. Then you've got the more experienced, say, injectors or surgeons who want to be able to constantly review their work in the most accurate and high quality way. And then you get the people who are more worried about the ethics. Patients have body dysmorphia. Patients come in with unrealistic expectations because they've been treated in a dozen other clinics, and those clinics have maybe lax standards of assessment and image capture. And you want to be able to reset someone's expectations by giving them the truth about what's happening with their skin tone or the shape of their face. So from my point of view, when I get a sales call or someone inquiring, I have to sort of gauge what's the most important thing to them. And that is often the thing that sort of gets them across the line. And then all the other benefits come as part of the package. So, there's several sites where people come just because they wanted to stand out on social media. And then 6 months later, they message me and say, look, we had a really difficult patient in here and your system saved us because we could show the patient where their baseline anatomy was. Or the patient who says there's no difference and I've paid thousands of dollars. You just zoom into an image and then they can see, oh, wow, actually my pigmentation has improved, or the shape of my face has changed. So it really depends on the priorities of the clinician, and often that comes through their training and who influences them.
Yeah, I was going to say, why are people resistant to actually taking good photos was my question. I mean, it's obvious why you would want to, but why do people consistently not do that and not invest in it?
Well, I think it's a cultural thing too. I think if you took 20 of the biggest pharmaceutical and device companies that are in these booths at the conferences or internationally even, you would probably see that their photography of what they market of their products is pretty subpar. So if it's coming from industry and they're KOLs who would, again, get up on stage and then they've got really bad clinical photographs to back up their talk, I think that is the part of the cultural problem where it's not instilled into that audience that this is something that they need to take seriously. I don't want to say that's the whole industry, because obviously you and I know, been to a lot of these meetings, that it has changed and progressed. I'm very proud when I walk into a meeting and I know, 90% of the faculty are my clients and they're given a really good educational material. But then there's that odd influencer or speaker who I feel it's almost contemptuous for your audience to pitch up there and have these slapstick photographs that aren't scientific, that aren't reproducible, and to get up there and talk about, glow or radiance, or, insert a litany of different words that these companies use. And then it's like groupthink. Everyone just nods and smiles, and when they're looking at this projector of an out of focus photograph. So it's why I'm trying to write a paper on imaging standards, so that at these meetings, there can be a rating system. And people can see, this talk has been rated A. So I haven't figured out the scale yet, but, if it's an A to an F sort of scale, and there needs to be a page to say, these are the reasons why it's an F, or these are the reasons why it's an A. And I think that's the only way you're going to progress the science, because photography is a science, as is ultrasound, as is a dermatoscope, and it needs to be treated with the same, degree of reference.
Yeah. I think it's
in my opinion.
I think it's part of the industry where we are in terms of just maturity and development. We're seeing people starting to take all aspects other than just the clinical application of technique way more seriously, whether it be business, the way their clinics are laid out. I think it's just part of us growing up as an industry. But if you go and have a look at artists, the way they take photos of their work, whether they're sculptors or painters, and they want to present their work, even if you go to like conferences with companies that sell product, if you're selling like a watch or a piece of jewelry or a piece of clothing, all those images are taken by professional photographers with the best equipment that money can buy often. And it stands to reason that you would take the same thought process when it comes to advertising your product, what you do. In this is art, really, isn't it, Jake? I mean, you're performing art on people's faces, and it has, it's underpinned by medicine and science, but it is art.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of crazy when you think about it, that you wouldn't present it in the best way, seeing as the only judgment is what it looks like. Yes, it could be the price and how painful it was in your bedside manner, but ultimately when they're in Google looking at your photos, or can't do that in Australia anymore, but other countries they would.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like I always say to injectors, it's like if you're looking for a restaurant on Google, same price point and everything, would you go for the one with awful photos and horrible looking food, or nice looking food with good photos? It's a no-brainer.
Yeah. It's
because it looks better, it looks presented. You trust in them, they take pride in their work, it looks clean and good. So same
I would add to that sometimes we think we have to remember who the audience is. And if the audience is other clinicians, you should meet them at a higher standard to say, well, I'm presenting, say, a paper or data or my technique on a procedure, and this is objective scientific imagery to back up what I am saying or what I am telling you I do. And then the other side of the coin is the public, who, whilst, yes, the public knows what filler and toxins are or what a breast implant is now, but you have to over-educate them, because they are going to judge non-medically, subjectively on your results. And now with Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, this is the platform that people will review your work, and they can open up, 10 clinics at once and dive between all these different channels. So if you want to stand out, you have to take this seriously.
Yeah. I wonder if one day the algorithm will rank quality of photography higher, or will it have a bearing on where you rank? I mean, I don't know. It's possible, right?
Unfortunately not. I think the algorithms are terrible, and they reward, obviously, engagement, but often what is more engaged with, more liked, more commented on is the more extremes of results and treatments. And I've had to slide in this in some of my presentations before, where, you'll have someone's work that has 5 likes and then someone's work has 15,000. Clearly the one who has 15,000 looks more popular and gets pushed to a wider audience, but it's often quite grotesque. what some of these clinics are doing, especially in the UK, seems to be quite bad compared to Australia. And everyone looking at that image, it's borderline mutilation. And I'm obviously not a clinician, but I can call a spade a spade. And then it's got so much engagement that that's just going to get pushed to more and more channels, and then more and more public, and then it gets normalized over time. Yeah. It's really sad to see when you zoom out and have a look at those sort of trends.
Yeah. At the beginning of the talk, you spoke about iPhones and iPads not really being fit for purpose. So can we just revisit that in terms of why aren't they good? What are they doing to images, and what do people need to know about these types of technology when they're using them for their photography?
Very good question. And I review this every generation of new phones that come out. So that's pretty much every 12 months. The fundamentals are based in physics, in the sense that a camera has three main things: the optics, the sensor, and the software. Now, a phone and a camera are both computers with optics attached. The great thing about a camera is that the settings that you program into it can be saved as a user setting. So that means when you turn that camera on and you turn it to that user setting, it will always reproduce those settings when the shutter is pressed to take a photograph. Same way when you pick up a laser head and you dial in the wavelength and the depth and the intensity, you want it to be predictable. You don't want it to be random and then just shoot the patient. With a phone or an iPad, the way Apple and Samsung and the others market, they would have you believe that they're very good at taking photographs, especially with these things like, 48 megapixels, this, blah, blah, blah. The physical constraint of the size of the sensor and the size of the optics mean that the software on those phones has to do backflips in order to make an image look good. And then what it tends to do is it overcorrects and it obliterates skin detail, or it'll shift skin tones, because it's essentially on automatic every time you pick it up. And that's fine for the real world, because it needs to be able to shoot, your kid brushing their teeth or being out on a landscape. But when it comes to a clinical setting, you want to be able to reproduce the image every single time. The other thing is that the size of the imaging sensor on a camera, even a consumer camera that's, $1,200 Australian, is 7 or 8 times the surface area of a phone. So the bigger the sensor, the more information it captures, the more gradients of color, the more accurate the skin tone and detail. And then when you look on a proper monitor, so whether that's a laptop or an iPad or a 27-inch screen in the case of what we install, there is so much detail there that the camera is capturing. Whereas when you do a comparison between that and a phone, as soon as you zoom in, it just falls apart. If you're a dermatologist and you're interested in skin tone, if you're injecting something like Reduran or Revive, and you want to market on, how the skin albedo and reflection changes, or there's a lifting effect, you can't do that with a phone or an iPad. And it's really sad to see, people go through all this training, they spend all this money on product, they give their photos to a marketing company, and they then post it before and after, and it's just a waste of everyone's time and money.
Yeah, it's a really good point. Can you explain what megapixels mean and resolution, just for the dummies who don't understand photography, and I include myself in that?
The great thing is that, with all these systems, you don't have to understand photography. And I've written papers for those who want to know, because I'm a geek and I love to geek out on it. And I think photography is a really interesting craft. But fundamentally, resolution is the amount of detail that an image sensor captures. You would have heard that phrases like 12 megapixels, 24 megapixels, 50 megapixels, 100 megapixels. So you take the surface area of the camera sensor and you divide it by the height and the width, and that will give you the amount of pixels on that surface area. So in the case of the cameras we install, it's 24 megapixels over a surface area, which is, I don't know if you guys can see that. Yeah, probably won't focus up.
camera?
Probably won't focus because it's focusing on my face, and this is a podcast. But it's about the size of a postage stamp versus something that's the size of half your pinky nail on a phone.
Yeah.
So the more resolution you have, it's like that jump between like a 1080p TV or 4K TV.
Yeah.
It's monumental. Same surface area, more detail. So when you zoom in, there's still detail, and you can zoom in multiple times, the more resolution you have.
Yeah.
Why that's convenient in a clinical sense is that typically when you take a photograph of someone's face, you'll take a shot from clavicle to top of the head. And then instead of going in and photographing the mouth or the mid-cheek or the eye, you have one image, clavicle to top of head, and then you just zoom in the software to the indication that you're treating or you wish to market. So that saves an enormous amount of time per consultation, and then hours per week, and then so much per calendar year. So yeah, that's what resolution does.
Right. Yeah. Well, I guess as you said, when you want to zoom in on particular areas of the face and you want that hyper amount of detail, where the difference between a good result or a bad result can be sometimes very subtle, as you said, when you're talking about like skin tone or clearing pigment or looking at small textural changes, you're not going to be able to have that sort of level of granular detail with a mobile phone device or an iPad, which could also then, take us down the road of like medico-legal, which is, always there in the background looming. When a patient thinks they haven't got the result that they signed up for, patients have selective memories. We all do. We kind of get used to what we look like now and forget what we look like before. And so when you have the capacity to really hone in on detail, forget marketing or advertising or bringing in new patients, just to be able to show someone accurately what you've been able to achieve with that level of detail is, you probably can't put a price on that.
Yeah. I mean, the injectors have evolved as well. As you know, probably Woodrow, we're sort of using less and less of hyaluronic acid, which is a very obvious sort of shaping of a face or a contouring of a jawline. I think any layperson could probably see a before and after and say, oh yes, I see the result of that. But now we're doing more skin quality treatments and more subtle work.
Skin health.
Yes, but having a system that, you haven't even mentioned this, but your system also has a filter. So you can actually look at the color of the skin, pigmentation, redness, and other parameters, as well as obviously just the glow or the detail or the crepiness. But you can't really see any of that with an iPhone photo. I've tried because I actually had a colleague, she's a great injector, but she doesn't have a good photography system. So we did a photo of her in my clinic with your system and a photo with her iPhone, and we sort of zoomed in and had a play, and she was like, okay, I agree. This is better than
I don't even think it's a matter of like one better than the other. They're just different tools meant for different things. When you're like, hiking through the Himalayas, you don't want to be carrying a professional camera with you, probably, unless you're a professional photographer. You just want to capture the moment and the memory, send it to your friends, your family, and it's convenient. It's in your back pocket, but it's a different tool for a different job.
Yeah.
I think the phone and the iPad, they're great tools in clinic. They just need to be moved down the flow to the point that you view the images. So if you take a photograph with our system, what happens is the files get synced to the cloud. And then, one photo area can service, a dozen treatment rooms. And each treatment room usually has an iPad. So then they whip out their iPad, look at these high resolution images, pinch, zoom, rotate, and then use their pencil to annotate, write their dosages and their markup points. That's where those tools are fantastic. But as an image capture point of view, they're just not there. I wish they were. Maybe in another 5 years, yes, but not at the moment.
Now, can we talk about lighting? Because this is sort of a huge one. I think it is fairly simple to understand, but it's incredible how many injectors don't get it. And they try all these tricks of the trade. They buy ring lights and multiple lights, and still they struggle with consistency. So can you just sort of talk, lighting 101 about how to get a good photograph?
I think if you've ever walked through a perfume section of duty free and you look at all those high-end model shots or product photos, they look super crisp. They look stunning, and the colors pop. Everything looks accurate, like you could just touch it. and it's there, but it's a print or an image on a billboard. The reason why that happens is the lighting is done really, really well. And in a clinical setting, we want a light source that is consistent in its intensity, its color, and its angle. Those three factors are super important to be able to replicate what the face looks like in real life without a bias of an angle from the time of day changing or a bias from the color source, things like your overhead lights or your, a lamp that's on your desk that has more of a yellow cast. And the intensity and how much light you need is directly related to how much is in focus. So you would probably have seen with your system and others that use mine is that everything's sharp and everything's in focus. So when you see a face, tip of the nose to the tragus is sharp. And that's because those cameras get programmed with a particular aperture setting. And an aperture is really like if you look at your eye, it dilates, gets bigger and smaller. That's the same as what a lens is doing. And the smaller the hole, the sharper the image. So when you tell the camera to shoot at a value that's, let's say, f11, an aperture value of 11, it needs an enormous amount of light to do that, which is why when we install these lighting units, and they're called strobe lights, they are sending at least 400 watts of light into the room. It's a big pop. And when that reflects onto the patient, and then eventually into the camera, it's a consistent color and a consistent intensity.
Yeah.
The last thing I'd say is a bit more geeky is the color of that light, because our brains are fantastic at adapting to different light sources, but cameras aren't. You have to tell them what the color of the light is. The color of the light is something measured in Kelvin. You've heard of the Kelvin scale before? So the color of that light is 5,600 degrees Kelvin, which is the same as the sun. So if you went out into space now, you wouldn't see a yellow sun, you would see a bright white sun.
Right.
It's emitting light as a star at 5,600 degrees Kelvin. If you went to our nearest star, Proxima Centauri, that's 3,500 degrees Kelvin. So that would be a red sun. And it changes per sun all around the universe. Our brains evolved for 5,600 degrees Kelvin, which is why when you look at a human face and it's got a yellow light or a red light or, the color's off, straight away because your brain evolved to know what the correct color is. So when we are in a clinical setting, we don't want a yellow cast. We don't want a blue cast. We want the skin tone to be accurate. And then if you start there, then you can start to differentiate between capillary damage or pigmentation or photo damage or acne or rosacea, all these amazing skin conditions that exist in the world. And to your point earlier about filters, that's brilliant about these cameras is that there's so much data in them that you can extract the chromophores directly out of the wavelengths of light that are reflecting off the skin. I discovered it by accident when I saw Wood's lamp 10 years ago, and I thought, maybe I can do that. And it turns out you can. So you get a little bit of infrared and ultraviolet spectrum when you illuminate the subject with a strobe. So it's such an exciting space to be in because there's just so much diagnostic information there that it blows my mind when people aren't wanting to see that and see it by choice. There was a chain clinic I walked past in the shopping center the other day, one of the Westfield shopping centers. And, they've got to fit out millions of dollars. They've got all the ads. They've got all the signage. And then they've got this before and after being taken. And I'm just thinking the public don't have the literacy to know that this is wrong. And the nurses should, and the clinicians should. And that sort of comes from more of a cultural thing that has to exist within a clinic. So, sorry, that was a tangent. But that's what I deal with every day.
Maybe we can make it more practical with lighting. I mean, we always joke, David sends me, before and afters that he's come across on Instagram or whatever. And it's just hilarious to see the difference in the before and after just because they've put a light on or left the light off in the before photo. But can you just sort of explain to listeners who maybe, are still doing that by accident or by lack of education, why that's such a problem?
Because when you change the lighting intensity, direction, or color, it completely changes the shape of the face or the tonality of the skin or how reflective the skin is. So if you are trying to market on any device or product that's going to change that person, and you want to actually record what you're doing, you can't change the lighting at all. It has to be the same between each session. So things like time of day, the sun changes based on how much light lets in the window. And the other thing you see is something that's been ported over from the beauty industry is these ring lights. Yeah. And they're horrific because in fashion photography, we used to use them to make people look better than they do in real life. It's called a beauty dish. So when your light source is perpendicular to your focal plane, in this case, your patient's face or their body, the light source just fills all the crevices of the face and it flattens the face out. So you end up hiding a lot of the detail or work or money that has been spent into that face, and you can't really market the result. So, that would be my advice to people.
Yeah, or worse still, if you use a ring light on the before photo, they look great because all of the hollows have been hidden. So when you do your after photo, you're like, well, I don't see any difference because they look great in the before photo. So
yes.
Yeah, I just see it so commonly. What do you think, David?
As Woodrow said, I think it's just a cultural thing and ignorance thing. I think people don't know until they've actually experienced the difference. It's about education, really. I don't think the majority of people out there are knowingly doing the wrong thing. They just haven't just thought about the importance of it. I mean, if I think about it, if I was setting up a clinic, it just becomes part of the budget. I mean, people will spend thousands and thousands of dollars on websites and social media advertising campaigns and equipment to like film themselves when they want to do reels or education, but they sort of don't understand that this is so important and that it should actually just be part of your toolkit. That's almost non-negotiable, I think.
And it's one of the cheapest things to build into a clinic. I know I've obviously got my pricing and where it is in the market, but it's compared to all the other expenses of setting up a clinic and the return on investment you can get from objective imagery, it's nuts. And you see a lot of people spend a lot of on their fit out, their branding. And then after 4 or 5 months, like, why are we quiet? Why are people not resonating with the amazing work we know we can do, or these expert clinicians are putting out? Because they might have happy patients, because those patients walk away, they're happy with their result, but they can't really market those results because the results aren't really evident in the way they've been captured. Yep. And I obviously see the inside of a lot of businesses around the country, and I'm really proud of that return that we give people. And it's sort of one of the things I always want to maintain is making sure that people are using the tools properly to get that return, both for that initial consult, meeting the patient, building trust, but the long-term marketability of the imagery.
And one of the things that you mentioned was that your photography goes directly to the cloud. And I know a couple of my friends, and obviously Jake has your system as well. It's all very seamless. The patient has a consistent place where they stand, the camera's in a fixed position, there's a strobe light which is generally fixed into the roof. Someone takes a photo, they click the button, the light goes off, and then all of a sudden this image just is transposed onto a screen, or whatever screen you want, your computer screen. And there's no process of uploading it. Everything just seems to happen very quickly. And then, as you said, it's stored in the cloud as well. So you've got some data security measures in place, because getting back to the iPhone, we're picking on iPhones a lot. These devices can get picked up, they can get taken out of the clinic. There's and phones get hacked all the time. So, I mean, you want to talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, you shouldn't have patients' images on your personal device, full stop. It's in the APRA guidelines, and the idea is that you have to create a separation of that data set of patient photographs to your own personal life. And the concept is that it has to be safe and secure, but also easily accessible to those who have permission. So you've probably heard of something called two-factor authentication. And the idea is that you have a cloud account, you know who is logged into it, you know what the credentials are. And then the patient also has that peace of mind that you're taking their privacy seriously. I'm not sure if you remember a couple of years ago when Medibank got hacked and Optus got hacked.
Yep.
millions of dollars of lost data, privacy compromised. You've probably seen an uptick in your own spam, in your own phone and emails. And this is where these hackers get the data and then they try push scams onto us. From a clinical point of view, the cloud is the best thing that's ever happened, because it means you don't need an on-site server, which can cost upwards of $30,000. Plus, you need to maintain that server. And it means that with the Privacy Act that was updated last year, you have to be as in control of that data as you can be. So it means storing it in Australian servers. It means that you can remove images if patients don't proceed with that procedure. You can label things as consented if patients are happy to be marketed to with those imagery. So the cloud is a massive time saver for a clinic. So if you're not on it already, it's really worth talking to your IT company about. Why not?
That's a good point, actually. Do you have any recommendations for maybe what you've seen other clinicians do about how they approach asking patients for photos? And, a lot of patients feel a bit awkward or resistant, or they're worried about, what's happening with their photos. So just what are the best practices that you can suggest?
So documentation. Firstly, when you meet that patient, they would have been exposed to your photographs on your socials, your website, perhaps even your pre-booking forms. You set their expectations before you even have them walk in the door that the photographs are going to be captured for their own safety and for medical record, and that you as a clinic will store those imagery safely, and you can even label where you're going to store them, and be very explicit that their privacy will be maintained. If they wish to consent, give them levels of consent. So you could say we have internal consent to capture that image and store it. That's one type. Or we have marketing consent to market on different platforms. So you could have an external marketing option, and then give people options. Say, okay, can I market on Instagram and Facebook? Tick, tick. Can I market on TikTok? No, thank you. Or can I market on these platforms and de-identify you? As soon as you can de-identify someone, everyone's yes rate usually goes up because they know they won't be traced back to them. It's harder sometimes in smaller towns because everyone knows everyone, and having a full-face photograph of someone getting treatment can sometimes be a bit frowned upon. And then you've got things like, breast augmentation. You don't want your face in that. So making sure that you have examples of the way you're going to market these photographs. Some clinics will have a book. Some clinics will have an iPad with their before and afters. So you show that patient what they can reasonably expect those the images to be used for in the future. If you just verbally say all this, they'll retain 10% of it. And as soon as their fight or flight response goes up, they're not going to say, yes, yeah, you can use it. So bit of a mouthful there. And we have some protocol like that on our website for clients to download. But the idea is that every touch point is safety, privacy being maintained, and a culture of education first, not marketing. You don't want to appear desperate to market them. Yep. You say, look, you've had a great result. We really want to educate other patients on what's possible with your result.
Mm. So AI, it tends to come up in almost every conversation we have these days because it's just growing so exponentially. I don't even think anyone knows what's coming next or what's real or not anymore. But how's this impacting our industry from a photography perspective, helping or hindering?
I would say as a first statement in bold, loud, from the top of the hill, AI is incredibly dangerous for this industry because we already have a history of misrepresentation of what these devices and treatments can do. And AI is starting to replace stock photographs. I've saved a dozen on my Instagram to be able to broadcast in an article because clinics are now starting to use the marketing material they've either bought, and a lot of it is AI, so AI-generated imagery. The second thing I would say is that it is a very unregulated space at the moment, and there are lots of dangers to this because soon we're going to have to be able to prove a photograph is real. So by that, I mean there are standards that are going to come out called content authentication, where your camera and the metadata that your camera captures every time you take a photograph is going to have a little bit of code in it to say that this content is authentic and doesn't have AI in it. It hasn't been manipulated, because the platforms aren't doing it. There is some regulatory stuff that's happening in California at the moment, in different AI bills in the Senate, to be able to hold these companies to account to say that this image is manipulated or enhanced by AI. It's a very dangerous space, because previously, and I think what brought on this wave of regulation is that patients weren't having realistic expectations of what these treatments were doing or what someone's qualifications were. And AI is just pouring kerosene on this. So, I would be very wary of AI. There are benefits, obviously. There's some great AI tools in like the mole mapping space, which are used to, map moles on the face over time. That sort of stuff, fantastic. But there is a lot of hot air and a lot of applications. I don't know if I'm going to name them. La Roche.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, who's their parent company?
Is it L'Oreal? I don't know.
Yeah, L'Oreal. So a very big company. They rolled out an application to use AI skin analysis. Upload a selfie from your phone, and then they ask for your email, send you the results. And I do it under a fake email, and then every 3 hours you'll get spammed with something that you apparently need. You guys are experienced in this industry, as am I, but maybe a 19-year-old girl isn't. She drops $500 a year on this product. L'Oreal shares go up. Everyone's happy. The other thing is other companies have asked me to do trials on AI skin analysis tools, and they're all just rubbish. There is a lot of noise in this AI bubble at the moment. So I would suggest that everyone just, sits down and tries to be a bit more objective about it, and waits for really good papers to come out proving the efficacy of these AI analysis tools before they jump on them.
I guess dovetailing with that, you sort of mentioned regulations, I guess specifically here for Australia, and, we don't need to go sort of down the detail, but how would you suggest that clinicians or clinics are more ethical with what they're promoting? I mean, you said you've already seen some using AI or filters, or, you've sent me multiple examples in the past where we've had a good giggle, but what should clinics be doing to showcase themselves in a, let's call it an ethical way?
Look, I think there is always, you need to try to remove bias in whatever form it is. So that might be technology, that might be technique, or might be language. And the idea with strong photos that are really clear and objective is that you don't actually have to say too much about what the result is, because the photographs display that evidently. Stephen Liu, many, many years ago, we did a campaign together where we took 6 or 7 patients, and we did the before and afters. They went through surgery, and I'll never forget what he told me. He's like, I'm not going to tell my audience when I launched this campaign what these patients had. And he didn't. And it was a very successful campaign, because you would just look at the before and after, and you didn't care what they had. Obviously, from a marketing point of view, you're going to call the clinic and say, I saw this person's before and after. Do you like my nails, by the way? My daughter did them.
I was going to say, I thought you were having a midlife crisis or so. Tell us.
I definitely haven't a midlife crisis, but he really went for the spearhead of like, just show the difference, subtle changes that are attractive in an aesthetic way. And I would loop back and say, like, if you are as objective and scientific as you can be, then I think you're ethical as a byproduct. I think if you're trying to hide things with filters, or you are, asking AI to make it better, then, that all compromises the ethics of what you're trying to educate people on.
Yeah. I mean, one of the regulatory changes that I wholeheartedly sort of agree with is, the consistency of photos, because, there's all sorts of tricks, getting people to stretch their neck to show that their neck looks better, or just adjusting the angle of the light. And we've already discussed all of that. But, if you're doing that deliberately, I do wonder whether at some point, those clinicians could be punished for it, because really what you're doing is you're lying about what you do, and you're false advertising. And I don't know.
The question for you guys then, do you think that because the industry has grown so quickly and everyone wants to appear successful and busy and doing the best and having the latest, do you think there's a pressure for everyone to sort of market this standard or ideal that they're not quite achieving just yet?
I've definitely heard similar murmurings from maybe more junior injectors. Now, of course, in Australia, because you rarely see injectable before and afters because it's sort of illegal, maybe it's died down. And I think that's good both for patients who aren't pressured to maybe want results that aren't real, but also for injectors to not, maybe be tempted to use filters because they couldn't achieve that result. So I think it's probably good for everyone just to lower the expectation to actually go in and have a proper consultation. But have you heard that from people?
Look, I think what I've heard is that it's a very competitive industry, and there's sometimes a fraternity, and then there's sometimes a lot of animosity between people. But what's great is that when everyone's using the same sort of standard of photo system, you're showing your cards, you put up your results, and then everyone judges. And sometimes that technological bias of a filter or a phone, or you can't see the detail, the lighting's changed, it robs you of being able to promote if you have got a good result, or if you have an amazing treatment journey that you want to broadcast. You're sort of robbing yourself of that ability to broadcast it. And I think it's a double-edged sword when you have good photos, is that patients are going to be more critical, but you're going to be more critical of yourself. Dr. Sarah Hart said that to me a few years ago, where she's like, I've never been so critical of myself analyzing my work, and it's improved me as an injector over time, because I'm seeing things that you can't ordinarily see. But on the TGA stuff you touched on, under their FAQs, the most confusing double think language where they say before and afters aren't banned, you just can't list what the product is in I was so angry when that came out, and I just thought it was such a missed opportunity to actually help the industry and the community and the patients by not banning things, but enforcing the standards that were written 10 years ago to say these are how photographs should be taken. I mean, it's quite loose, their language, but there is some things like consistency and makeup, color, exposure, the fundamentals, things you could, even if you don't want to buy a system, you could self-educate on with the numerous free papers and YouTube things. I think there was a real missed opportunity there. And they sort of outsourced to the independent arbiter of judgment, which is the public, who are the least educated to make this judgment of what's in the photograph. So it was overturned in New Zealand after a few years. So I'm hoping the same will happen, with enough advocacy.
Well, so just to clarify, what is the law? What are you saying we can and can't do with respect to injectable?
If you look under Schedule 4 medicine, again, I'm not a lawyer. I'm just interpreting what's under the FAQs, but it's pinned on my Instagram. The top thing is a screenshot from the FAQs to say that before and afters are not banned. I'll get the actual sentence now. It's
so poorly worded that I've just avoided it because I just don't.
Where is it? It's not banned. You just can't discuss the Schedule 4 medicine. So what a lot of people have started doing is they've just put a full face before and after where there's clearly been a result achieved, and they've listed the contact details of the clinician or booking form to say this result was achieved by one of our team. Please contact for further details because we can't discuss the case notes, which is a sort of middle ground.
Yeah, I don't want to be misquoted here because I haven't actually looked at this in a while because I've just sort of given up. But I was fairly. You also have to abide by the ARPRA guidelines, which are much more specific, and they do say you actually have to say what you've done.
Correct.
Not list the medicine, but say what you've done. So that's why you can't satisfy both regulators because they're sort of in conflict.
Correct. It's like an episode of Utopia.
Yeah. So actually, people are still sort of contravening one of the rules if they have done what you just said.
So yeah. Yeah, it was definitely not the right move, and maybe after many years of looking at this industry and the way they looked at it as a governing body, they would probably see a lot of poor standards, aggressive marketing tactics, and glamorization of these treatments. So in a way, I don't blame them for wanting to regulate it more. I just think they did it really poorly. Patients aren't going to come across more educated through these changes. And on Instagram and websites, it's not a walled garden. People can still find this information overseas. Not so. And it's affecting people's businesses as well. And during a per capita recession and a cost of living crisis. So,
yeah, I mean, I don't think AHPRA or regulators, God love them, I don't think they care about our businesses. Their mandate would be patient safety, et cetera, et cetera. But have your say, David.
Oh, yeah, I mean, I think that everyone's probably doing the best that they can. I don't think there's anyone out there in the regulatory land that has evil intentions or wants to hurt people's livelihoods. I think, as you said, they want to protect the public. And I think the technology is moving so quickly. This industry is moving so quickly. It's so in demand that I think it's very difficult to know exactly where the sensible middle ground is, to be honest with you. I think everyone's probably doing their best. It's like everything. We'll probably arrive at a sensible solution after we've gone from almost no rules to maybe too many rules, or rules haven't been thought out properly. And it's like swings and roundabouts, and it swings from one pendulum side to the other. Yeah. I think we'll probably arrive at a sensible point at some point. I just think
the middle ground. Yeah,
we're probably playing catch up at the moment and overcorrecting. I do see the utility and sort of just displaying a beautiful before and after photograph, and is there dangers in patients saying, well, this patient had this many mils of this and this many mils of that. I want that. And then they walk into a clinician, and because that result was achieved with that treatment protocol with that patient, doesn't mean it's going to be right for you. So does it automatically put the injector on the back foot because now they're having demands put upon them because someone's seen a result that's great and demands the same recipe for their face or their situation, and it's entirely not relevant for them. So,
well, that's why you come to consultation. Yes. And you explain that's not achievable, but let's look at your face.
Yeah.
So,
correct
definition, you do what AHPRA want, which is a consultation.
Yeah.
So that can all be satisfied, but still have before and afters.
Yeah, I think the before and afters should definitely be allowed. I see both sides of not being able to say what you've had done. I like the idea that Stephen did, which was just let people call up, and every treatment's bespoke. If you want to find out what these different treatments do or what this device does, you can find that information online. But in terms of knowing what's going to be the best for you, I think it puts the power back in the hands of the clinician.
Yeah.
Because people think it's the product that's doing that. The product's just a tool.
Yes.
That's in the hands of the skilled injector. So if you want a portrait done, you're not saying to the artist, I want you to use this paint with this paintbrush. I want a beautiful painting. You go and do what you do. I just want the end result. It's the same with what you guys do. You're painting with someone's face, and these are your paintbrushes and your paint.
Yeah. Well, hopefully this isn't premature to announce, but AHPRA have agreed to come on our podcast.
Yeah.
So we're going to do at least one, if not two, podcasts with AHPRA. So we're really excited.
Amazing.
Then we can actually hear, if you like, from the horse's mouth, their perspective. Because, I'm wary that, from an injector and a business sort of person's objective, we're possibly biased and we don't fully understand the motivation. Why these regulations into space? So, so hopefully they can explain it for us.
I found the sentence for you. Advertisers are not prohibited from using before and after photos to advertise their health service. However, they must not directly or indirectly refer to prescription-only substances or goods containing such substances used in the delivery of that service. What a sentence.
Yeah.
So if you want to play conservative, the way we've trained some of our clinics is that put the before photo up. Take that really high-quality before photo, and in the copy, the description, talk about the patient's goals, what they're concerned about. You don't mention any product. And that lets your audience know how much care you take in a consultation. So you're talking more about anatomy, aging, skin health, those sort of things. And then that is still giving you an education platform to be able to use your photographs if you feel conservative.
But then could you, and I don't know if this is sort of being too sneaky, in a separate post, but right next door, do the after? There's not a before and after if they're not shown in the same post, right? Technically.
Well, yeah, technically, you're right. But also, like, none of these regulatory things talked about AI at all, in terms of misinformation or disinformation. And I think bad photographs really do fall under that misinformation, disinformation banner.
Yeah,
because you are misinforming someone on, the contour of a face by capturing a photo from 10 centimeters away. And sometimes with the aggressive skin filters, or, even just putting a patient lying back and then taking the photograph on the chair, that's disinformation. That's not what their lips look like when they stand up. I mean, that's just lips, but the same can be applied to other parts of the body.
Yeah. So just for a disclaimer there, please don't take the advice of Legal Sloan or Legal Seagull. Please talk to your lawyer in your local area about what you can and can't do.
Yes. Now, something that we haven't touched on, I don't think we asked you in our first podcast many years ago, 3D photography. It's not new, but it's maybe becoming more available, maybe more affordable. I don't know. There's a couple of systems out there. My understanding, unless I've got this wrong, is they're not really a photo. They're more the word is a
simulation.
Yeah. So it's sort of like a bit of guesswork, and maybe it's not fully accurate. But can you talk to that?
From a technical point of view, the 3D systems out there, they are capturing multiple images from different angles, but then they will wrap those images around a 3D mesh. I would say that they are great tools for showing like volumetric changes and vector changes in the skin, but they're not clinical photographs. And you will see whenever you use these software platforms that there's usually a little asterisk on the bottom that says individual results may vary.
Right.
So if you are trying to establish realistic expectations, you don't want to be using simulations as your primary source of educating a patient. The other thing too is that they're often, you can just do the face or just do the breasts. It's not a tool that's versatile for all parts of the body and all types of conditions, because most clinics now, as you say, HA sales are going down and they're diversifying into energy devices and cosmeceuticals. They need to be able to talk about multiple parts of the body and multiple conversations, not just the shape of a face. So I think 3D definitely has its place for studies, but I wouldn't start at 3D. It's often very, very expensive and doesn't do just the basic job of a great photograph.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, I think it would be useful for, studies and sort of really showcasing some detail, like you said, volume or lift. But if you're having to convince a patient who's, bought some filler from you that they can't see it in an actual photograph, and you have to show them
a simulation
in a vector with a 3D photo, I think there's something wrong. Because they should be able to see it in a photo, or a good photo, like you're using your system.
Yeah, obviously I've got a bias because I have my product and my business, but that has generally been the feedback from both the skin analysis devices and the 3D ones, that when people decommission them and then they take me on, they say, look, this device gives us a whole bunch of numbers, but it's not really telling the patient what we're seeing. Because either the visual quality isn't good enough, or like in the case of a lot of skin analysis machines, it's only a small segment of the face as opposed to the shape of the face or the décolletage or other parts you can treat. And often numbers and values, there's no emotional connection to them, so you can give people all these metrics and say, you've improved, but the photos either aren't showing that. And like you said, if you have to convince someone with that, then you're not in a good place.
Yeah.
So speaking of your system, what's actually involved in terms of someone calls you up, Woodrow, or sends you an email and says, tell me more about your system? Can we sort of unpack that a little bit and give people an idea about what it's going to look like, how long it's going to take you to put it? So obviously, as you alluded to, Woodrow, you offer systems pretty much, was it all around the world? I know you definitely do the United States. Where else are you?
Australia, South Africa, UK.
Yeah. Okay.
Wales, Japan, Saudi Arabia, New Zealand, India, so far. So,
yeah, right.
And Canada.
And probably. So is there any sort
the United States of Florida too?
Yeah. So is it, I mean, you're in people's clinics and you're meeting people from different parts of the world, different cultures, different personalities, staff members, etc. So what are some of the key takeaways from, I guess, having that privileged position of being inside or getting a sneak peek into people's clinics and businesses?
I think everyone faces the same challenge of finding good people and good people that align with the ethics and the culture of the owners. Because by the end of the day, most practices are small businesses that have worked very hard to build their brand and their clinic. And keeping and retaining good people is one of the challenges everyone faces. I've tried to fit in with that by always upgrading my training materials and having like a modular academy that keeps people doing the right protocol. And you quickly, when you meet people and you're training them for the first time, you quickly figure out if they're really interested in photography. And if they're not, that's a red flag. Because if they're not interested in photography, they're really not interested in the patient. And sometimes, I give the same tool to everyone, and then you see, results vary. Because in some practices, the owner's like, this is so important, we're going to do this right. The team are going to watch the modules, they're going to do the training, they're going to follow up with Woodrow in a month's time for more training. And then some you don't hear back from after 12 months. And those are just different cultural viewpoints within the practice. So I would say if you are trying to find new staff members, ask them about how important photography is for their patients, or how do they approach photography when they treat a patient. And if they say, sometimes we take photos, if the patient doesn't want to, we won't, because we don't want to pressurize them, then I would say that's a red flag in your interview. Or if you've got a staff member that wants to apply for a job and says, yeah, photos are so important, I really love charting the journey and looking at all the detail, and then maybe, give them the job.
Yeah, that's a good point. Final question. So what's coming next for you? I know you've been doing some research. I understand that you've been working on a couple of papers or even with universities. So tell us about that.
So we've got a paper that's in development now called the Theo rating system, which is I alluded to earlier, where I've got a few surgeons together and a couple of injectors, and we're going to develop a rating system for conferences. So that's, when people's presentations are submitted, that an independent person can rate the imagery on that paper or that presentation. And then the other one with Victoria University, who have had the system for about 6 months now, they want to do a study with these skin filters and be able to show, the changes in hypertrophic scarring, which I'm really interested in, because the skin detail you can see when you have the melanin filter or the vascular filter from the system, it's really illuminating and showing all the different wavelengths of light in skin. And if we can develop a way of detecting BCCs and SCCs just from a standard camera versus a dedicated $100,000 mole mapping machine, then I think there'll be a game changer for a lot of smaller practices, especially regionally, because Australia is a very big place and there's a lot of regional doctors who just don't have the equipment. So, I got my start in aesthetics, but I really want to try benefit the therapeutic and reconstructive side as well.
Yeah. I mean, for injectors like myself, I don't generally manage skin. We have a skin team and a laser team, etc. But if I can throw on a filter easily, doesn't cost anything, but with the photos that I take, I can look at the filter and show them their sun damage. It's such an easy referral to the skin team. Patients go, oh my God, I had no idea. Yes, book me in. I need to sort that out. You've got a perfect storm in Australia with, this population type that isn't evolved to live in this hemisphere. Yeah. And they've all spent their whole life on the beach. Did you see that TikTok thing a few weeks ago with all the girls and boys on Bondi Beach all getting suntan, and like the suntan is like a mark of like popularity and showing that they had a good summer. You didn't see that? Maybe we're all too old now to be on that TikTok. But no, I think it's that case that people don't know what's actually going on with their skin. And you as a clinician, even if you're just doing aesthetics, you really, I think, have a responsibility to just
check in and say, let's look at your sun damage, or let's look at your capillary damage, or and then that patient will trust you more.
Yeah, 100%. So just to reiterate, we do have an offer with Clinical Imaging and Woodrow. So if you go to the bottom of the podcast description, there'll be a link. We call it IA offers. We've got a number of offers with a number of companies, but Woodrow's company is one of those, and you get 10% off. Now, because Woodrow's system isn't cheap, that's actually quite a significant saving. So check it out. There's a number of different builds and sort of options, but I think hopefully this podcast has inspired you to at least look at this stuff. I'm not saying go and buy it tomorrow, but look into it, do your research, think about where it might live in your clinic. It really doesn't need to be a big space. It can be fitted in the corner of the room and up your game.
Yeah, because you get what you pay for. And in the grand scheme of things, when it comes to how much we buy our products for, fit out our clinics, as I said, spend money on advertising campaigns and websites. I know what your systems cost. I think they're a drop in the ocean compared to all the other expenses, and probably worth every cent and more. So I think we're very lucky we've got people like you in our industry helping us get better at what we do. So thanks for coming on. Thank you for contributing and helping us to further educate our listeners, and looking forward to catching up with you soon, and wishing you all the success in the world for 2025 and good health.
Thank you, both of you. It's always good to talk, and I've learned something from you tonight as well. And yeah, like I said in the beginning, I think you guys are doing amazing work for this industry. So, onward and upward.
Thank you, buddy.
Thank you.
Most take care.
For our latest news, follow us on Instagram at Inside Aesthetics Podcast. If you want to get in touch with myself or David, follow us on Instagram as well at Dr. Jake Sloan and David_Inside Aesthetics.
Join our Patreon for invaluable business and injectable education. Get access to our global community of like-minded professionals, live and interactive Zoom sessions, hints and tip videos, webinars, and more. Head over to www.insideaesthetics.com/Patreon for more information.